If you find you're unsettled listening today, reach out to a trusted friend or go to tradespodcast.com and click on resources.
We are men in the trades, forging health in the drug poisoning crisis. This is
Off the Clock Toolbox Talk.
Hey, welcome to the Season 2 sampler of Off the Clock Toolbox Talk, a curious mix of Season 2 clips spiced with a few musical interludes to keep your workday going. Served up first, we have fan favorite of Season 2, Kale Moth, from Kale's story.
I got introduced into seeing what drug addiction and that side of life and alcoholism could really do to somebody. And, you know, it kind of fucked me up a little bit, not gonna lie, to be able to not have my brother there and have to be kind of the guy that raised the family and also not having my father there. You know, he was an alcoholic and gone. And so taking on those, I grew up and I told myself, you know, I would never, ever put my family in that position. Like, that's never going to be me. Like, fuck that. I'm better than that. I'm right. Putting my head down. I'm going to bust my ass and nobody's going to ever outwork me. And I can promise you that right now. And I think I went 3 months into working on a service rig. I got a brand new truck. Never, like I said, I had a 2002 Chevy Cavalier that was just beat up. I went to owning a brand new Dodge truck and done up with the rims, everything on it. I thought it was just the coolest thing in the world. I had that truck that my buddy had. I was like, this is awesome. And it was probably a month and a half after that, I used cocaine for the first time. And I was with people that I trusted, people that were two extremely close people in my life that had been through a lot of stuff with me growing up. But because they also worked in the oil and gas industry, I didn't know the kind of backside of life that they were living, the stuff that was behind the doors. And it's always, you know, put on that front when you're around Kale, right? It was good. It's all right. Well, then once I got introduced into that oil and gas industry and understanding the rig life, they're like, oh yeah, well, we can kind of bring them around. It wasn't even 4 or 5 months after getting on the service rigs, I started using cocaine. And after that, man, take a little bit and I can outwork anybody. I can do it. I can stay awake and I'm not crashing. And before you know it goes from just doing it a little bit on the weekends to, oh, well, it's Monday, I need to sober up a little bit before work. We got called in to do a rig job. Well, I got to get some quickly and it's fine. Well, then the guys on the rig start realizing that you're doing it. Well, now the doors can open for that. Oh, well, if you do it, just so you know, we all do it. Yeah. Not all the time was it the entire crew, but there's a good portion of the people that were actively using, and they don't kind of let you see that until they kind of feel like you're one of them and that they can understand and relate to that. And they'll, as soon as you fit in that way, it's like, okay, the Roughnecks buying the case of beer for the way home. You know, who's got the Coke for the ride home, or in the morning, who's got some? We got to fire up our day and get ready for this. We got to bust our ass and get this well done. And it went downhill really quick. Like I was making a large sum of money for 18 years old. And I was losing paychecks before they were even there. You know, I would, in 2 weeks as a baseline rig worker, you're making almost $4,000 after taxes. At 18 years old, what the heck are you spending that on? It's like, you shouldn't have any big bills. You shouldn't have mortgage, whatever. It's like, no, it was all going to drinking and partying. And I brought everybody and anybody that was around me with me, and it went downhill fast. Before I knew it, I had oh, absolutely. It's
you
invite 7 or 8 guys.
Or a good time, not a long time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Misery loves company.
Exactly. And when you start doing that, you get that big paycheck, and the guys are like, oh, that's crazy, right? There, how'd you do that? Oh, I just joined a service. Like, oh, well, how do I join? Oh, okay, well, we're just going to the bar. If you want to come join and meet the crew and meet some of the guys, maybe there's an opportunity for you to work. It's like, okay, well, then they bring their 4 friends, and it's, well, you got to be the new guy on the rig and you pay the bill, and everybody's like, oh, this is sick. And then it's, before you know it, you're just trying to live this life of fake fame almost. And you're trying to make sense of it. And before I knew it, that sense of belonging was like, okay, this is my family. These are the guys, like, these are who I want to be around. Turned into, what the hell have I done? Like, where and how the hell did I get here? Like, I have fucked myself over pretty hard right now. Like, I haven't seen my mom or my sister, who I promised I'd be there to help no matter what. I've moved away so I could be on the rig. I haven't phoned them to say hello. When I am on my days off, I'm trying to party more than I am seeing them. And it's like, all these promises I made myself was like, I got to raise my family. I got to be there to be the man. I got to bring myself up. But not having that, fulfillment growing up, turning 18 and getting that handed to me on a platter. And holy shit. And understanding when I say a runaway train, it was bad. It went from never touching drugs before to full blown. I was doing umpteen amounts of different drugs on weekends.
Fucking Miami Vice.
To try and just trying to fit in and trying to be that guy. And I was like, I felt happy and alive. Well, then after a little while, I was like, shit, like I don't feel good anymore. And I start sleeping in. I start missing work. And the guy's like, what the hell are you doing, man? Like, why aren't you showing up?
So
like,
of course
sorry,
you noticed
guys,
there was a problem, so
again.
you just quit right away.
Exactly.
You're just like, this isn't working for me. I better not do this anymore, right? It was just
just stop.
Just stop. End of story.
It's easy. Yeah, they're like, don't let it happen again. Don't sleep in. You'd be damned if it wasn't the next day or the day after I slept in again. And it was like, oh, well, what happens after that? Well, I know another rig crew that's hiring. I can just go hop on another rig crew because they're a dime a dozen. You might as well. And you can tell them like, hey, yeah, I've got some rig experience. Take on the opportunity, continue working on with a different crew. Well, in a week of them understanding and knowing what your past has been, because you open up with everybody, you get to understand and read people pretty quick. You fall right back into that group, and birds of a feather flock together. And man,
yes, and I could smell it on you.
Every single one.
I can smell my lifestyle on other people.
That was Kale, Karen, and Trevor from Kale's story. Go to tradespodcast.com and click on Kale's story to listen to more. Next up is Squishy Meat Bags. I don't have trauma, you have trauma. It's interesting that we're talking about trauma, and another clinical counselor, when they were listening to the Inner Asshole episode, said, yeah, that episode was totally about trauma. I was like, we didn't mean to do that episode on trauma. We actually kind of meant to do it about self-compassion, but nobody's going to listen to an episode about self-compassion. I'll barely listen to an episode about self-compassion.
Well, and you picked two people that clearly are traumatized and have traumatized themselves to a point and experienced trauma. So like, and I mean, I think when we were doing it, like Daniel and I both put ourselves through trauma. Yeah. So like when we were talking about that, like we were talking about the trauma that we inflicted on ourselves, and how we came out of that, and then how we talk to ourselves in our brains, and like the way we talk to ourselves in our brains is a direct response to the trauma inflicted upon us.
You can't talk about trauma without talking about coping. I mean, we all are trying to cope from something.
So in the episode before this one, Trevor was talking about how he thought that, like, when he was going into recovery, he thought trauma was like people who've been in really bad car accidents or something like that. That's not trauma?
It can be.
It can be.
Yeah, trauma is anytime that we feel like our survival is at risk.
It's a little bit of a tangent here, but it kind of struck a thing with me that when my first kid was born was shortly after I decided to kind of sober up and you know, make a little better with my life. So I'd quit the hard drugs and still smoking a little bit of pot at the time, probably a little more than I should. And I got high while my wife was in labor. And shit hit the fan, went sideways real fast. Emergency C-section, they handed me the baby, said best of luck, and left the room. And you know, I just started fucking panicking. And since that moment, like I was smoking, you know, a lot of weed at the time. I can't anymore. Not even a puff. And it was instant cold turkey overnight. Went to go smoke it the next day and freaked the fuck out.
Because being handed your child, your vulnerable newborn baby, and being all alone and being so high was more scary than any trip you've ever taken.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I just haven't not touched it since.
Yeah, here you're responsible for this right now.
Yep.
And you're like, I'm not even responsible for myself right now.
Yep.
And you're like, yeah, this life, like, if you don't cradle it perfectly in this moment, like, if you leave it here for too long, it will die right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and it knows nothing, and you have to teach it everything.
Yep.
Good luck. Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Went from
I'm panicking.
Homeless 6 months before that to now here's this baby, good luck.
Yeah.
That is huge. And that brings up another good point, too, is that we can actually be traumatized when the people we love are at risk.
That was Jason, Jonas, Sabina, and Karen from Squishy Meat Bags. Next, we have Mike Mathers and Daniel Snyder discussing emotional digestion from the Psychedelic Surprise episode.
And I want to tie in a few things. So this is why I think emotional digestion is really important. When you said, like, that's what grief is. It's essentially emotional digestion. And you're right, Daniel. We don't live in a society. We live in a society that tells people, run away from your grief. Mm-hmm. Remember, think positive. Don't let anyone know that you're feeling crappy. Don't complain. Don't be a whiner. Don't blame the past. You know, like, and we're really just like gaslighting people into doing the healthy things that they need to do, which is honor their pain, show up with reverence, build a temple of regret, and visit it often. You know?
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Do you want to
temple
hear?
of what's a temple of? So here's something I've often said. I've made this claim, and I don't know if it's an authentic claim, but I've claimed I don't regret anything. And I feel like that might actually be an unhelpful idea.
Yeah. Okay. Let's can we dig into that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an idea. People say no regrets.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what that philosophy of like live a life with no regrets is like? It's like, you know, walking across the street with a blindfold on, sticking your fingers in your ears and saying, I'm going to cross the street going like this, la, 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 because I'm not going to get hit by a car, la, la, la. Like, that's what no regrets is, you know? Regrets are important. Regrets teach us about things we've done that didn't serve us or opportunities that were missed. Have fucking regrets. Just don't dwell on them. Like, I encourage people, face up, not face down. If you want to have regrets, lie down and face up, not face first. It's a difference between ruminating and being curious. Not the same thing. Curiosity I'm promoting, you do it for 3 minutes, not 30 seconds. If you're doing it thinking and being curious for more than that, you're not being curious, you're ruminating.
To listen to more with Mike and Daniel, find Psychedelic Surprise on tradespodcast.com. Up next, Shayne, Trevor, and Karen discuss the mental health movement in the construction trades in Shayne's story, The Aftershow.
My biggest concern with this movement, which I think is good, but this movement of everybody focusing on mental health and pushing it, and nobody, I would honestly, we're going to suffer, because in 5 years, I feel there's going to be a crash of the wave, because everybody's going to realize they didn't know what the fuck they were doing.
With mental health?
With mental health. There's too many people jumping on. There's not enough there's not enough study yet, because it's not relatable to everybody. Mental health has always been studied on people who openly admit they're suffering.
Yes.
And are in a clinical setting.
Yeah.
There's not enough study on functioning in society for people to actually help other people.
Well, I agree with you on the piece, just with the men in the construction trades have not been reachable by the mental health field thus far.
Yeah.
So that's where I would totally see what you're saying. And sorry I interrupted you, Trevor.
No, I'm sorry.
But part of what I think the intersection of what Shayne's saying and what you're bringing up, Karen, is like, you know, mental health has become a trendy buzz thing, and we've got people coming into the space that lack maybe the depth or a genuine experience, and there's like this very social media facing version of mental health awareness and stuff.
Thank you.
And that's what men in construction see, and we're like, screw those guys. Like, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They don't know my experience. And those are babies. You're a weak, you're woke, so we see that it's, I've said it before, people in construction see through bullshit like that. And so what we're being fed online is a very groomed and superficial version of what mental health talks about. And the guys are like, what the fuck is that? Right? I don't need to do yoga on a stand-up paddleboard. Like, take that garbage and your goats that are walking over you.
Some love that shit. I do.
Totally. Now I do, because you know
what?
Let
me tell you.
And when I was in construction, primarily those years of my life, though, I don't know if you relate to this, Shayne. When I looked at spirituality or mental health or self-care, it felt very foreign to me. and I didn't think I was qualified or I was smart enough or it was who I was so married to my identity of being a tough guy that I wouldn't let any of that in. I just reject it. And
100%.
now almost 5 years clean and spirituality and self-care being at the center of my wellness. I'm like, wow, I was qualified the whole time. Who knew? Just because I didn't want to climb to the top of Mount Everest or, but now I embrace all those things and I see them for what they are, which is valuable.
That's a great explanation. It's where I was going. Thank you.
And that's exactly what our steering committee said. Our steering committee is made up of people with living experience largely. And they all said, I mean, you can put in a little bit of, we've had a couple of episodes specifically about trauma and stuff like that, but they're like, we want to hear people's stories. Like, that's really what we're relating to is 100%. Like, cut the bullshit. And get down to tell us about your journey, what worked, what didn't work, 100%. When you kind of started seeing the light and when you were desperate for the light but couldn't find it. Like, they want to know about that stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That was from Shayne's story, The Aftershow on tradespodcast.com. Next, we have Kale and Trevor discussing the imbalances that sometimes happen between your family and your crew from rig life.
Yeah, and so when it's within your group, you're kind of your brothers there on the rig. It's you can call each other some pretty harsh stuff. Like, you're riding each other's asses all day. It's like
all day
push, and it's like you get there, you wake up at, it could be depending on any location on your rig. If you're getting picked up in town and you're going out to your rig in the morning, it could be 3:30 in the morning or could be 4:30 in the morning. You get to your rig, you start working, you work your full shift, you get home at 9, 8 o'clock, sometimes 10, and then you're up the next morning to do it. So you got to understand, when you start spending that much time with a group of guys, and that much time is spent with the same 4 guys or same 5 guys, you're spending more time with them than your actual family. That group almost becomes your family. It trades positions with the immediate people in your life, almost switch spots with them. It's like you have a full-time job and a part-time relationship, and you just got to understand that that's the way it's going to be, and they get what's left over of you, but you can provide more money than you've ever had in an opportunity before. And
that was part of my guilt early on in my life. Like, looking back, was like, I had a young family. I had my oldest daughter was in diapers. I was, I'm at work 52.5. Well, that was my paycheck on a normal week without excess. That was 52.5 hours in a week. And then I'd go home and I'd be dog tired. And, I wasn't able to show, it just seemed so backwards to me that I'm spending all the best hours of my life with the most energy of my life on a job site and come home and my family gets the table scraps. But they got lots of food in the fridge and some shiny toys. And my girlfriend had a new car, right? Like, but is that what it's all about?
No, and that's just it, is, all that material stuff doesn't make up for the time that you lost. It's like when you're working away, I've seen drillers, endless amount of drillers and other workers that are celebrating their kids' first, second, third birthdays over a video chat call. And it's, to see that as understanding is, growing up, I didn't have the best upbringing. I didn't have my father there for me. And I promised myself at a young age, is like, I wasn't ever going to let my family go through that. My future family wasn't ever going to have that same way of being raised as I was. When I found the opportunity to work on a rig, I was like, you know what? I'm sinking myself full-heartedly into this. You get a schedule. Sometimes if you're working lots, your schedule goes out the window. They say, fuck it, you're working for a month, 2 weeks. It doesn't exist anymore. Your month, 2 months, it doesn't matter. And it happens. You'll go for a month and a half straight and bust your ass into the ground, where you just come home and you get 5 days off. Well, you're 2 days asleep, trying to figure out who you are as a person, trying to get your life back because you're so tired and worn out. You used to being around a bunch of dudes on a rig, getting up at a certain time, being rough and rugged all day. And then those 3 days that are left over with your family, well, you're trying to put in a month and a half of time that you lost in 3 days. And you usually just end up either pissing somebody off, overdoing it, or just there's so much tension and just insecure or unfamiliar feelings that it just becomes a mess.
I'm glad you said that, because I was just thinking about a friend of mine that worked in the oil patch, and he confided in me that, part of it was when he gets home, he doesn't feel like he belongs there. He doesn't even feel comfortable in his own home, because his just head's been a totally different space. He said sometimes it's like he comes home and his wife is a stranger to him, like, because he's been living in this space. There's just like this fucking like tribal system of like pre-civilization around these roughnecks. The sense of humor is different. They're not, he's like, man, I go from using utensils when I eat for 3 days to like eating with my hands, half asleep, and that's life. Like, I just dragging myself out of a trailer to go earn my keep.
That's it. You get used to sleeping in a hotel more than your own bed. You come home and your fiance or your girlfriend or wife, whatever it may be, is a stranger to you. I know with my last hitch, I had to work, my 3.5 weeks, and I would work all day. And being on a drilling rig now, like I work on I get a 12-hour shift every day, which is a blessing compared to what I used to working on the service rig side of things. It seems like a perfect job now. But the opportunity to see my family and be able to spend that time in my relationship, it's like I get up in the morning, I go to work, I get home at the end of the day, try and squeeze all my meals in, shower, get ready for the next day. My girlfriend would get like half an hour to 20 minutes on the phone with me, and that was it. And she'd get that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. It was just a half hour every single day to say hi, good night, see you tomorrow, stay safe. That was it. So then I get home, I'm exhausted and I'm drained. I'm just dead to the world. And the first thing she wants to do is, oh, let's go do stuff. Let's, and it usually ends up in an argument because you're drained. You're mentally not prepared for that overflow of excitement and energy. And it becomes hard. And, you start getting that battle of, is this the right thing for me? Should I be out here? And then but the paycheck's good. And it starts slowly creeping on you as a guy in the patch. You get hearing, oh, you shouldn't be out there. You're missing out on birthdays. You're missing out on this. You're not here anymore. You're abandoning your family. Yeah. It's like,
well,
okay.
And the mentality I was around was, it's all I had to do to entertain people around me was call them names and make fun of them almost, right?
Yeah.
And then I go home and my girlfriend wants to go out for dinner and do stuff like that. And that just seemed, the more time I spent around my crews and my work life, the more I started to think she was being unreasonable, right? Mm-hmm. Like it was like, and I go home with this attitude, like, hey, I need my space. I'm making all the money. Like I'm putting food on the table. I need space to do that. But yeah, it was a really weird situation. Like looking back, it's incredible how we get programmed to a certain mentality, because that's what we're surrounded by too.
You can find more of that conversation on Rig Life and other tough work sites. Next up, Daniel and Karen talk with therapist Mike Mathers in Curious AF.
And what I've noticed over these 15 years working with people primarily with addictions, pretty much any behavioral health problem at its root is a problem of self-acceptance. Now, what does that mean? It means we got a relationship with ourselves. A lot of people are not even aware that we have a relationship with ourselves. We do. In fact, it's our primary relationship. It's our first relationship. It's a fundamental relationship. It's the biggest, most important, longest relationship we are going to have for our lives is with ourselves.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're sort of an island. Everyone's an island. At the same time, we are profoundly social pack animals. Human beings are on the planet, not because we're the strongest, fastest, most vicious, but because we have the biggest, juiciest brains. And that allowed us 30 to 100,000 years ago to get together, to build weapons and tools and band together and work together. And that allowed us to survive. And that's why, for better or for worse, we now dominate the planet. So we're social animals, along with this idea of we need to accept ourselves and have a good relationship with ourselves. We need to have good relationships with other people. Now, the tension between those two things, the need to have a good relationship with ourselves, self-acceptance, or as Gabor Mate says, authenticity, and the need to be accepted by others, connection, or what Gabor Mate refers to as attachment. They're in tension throughout our lives for so many reasons. Because, you know, another piece is, you know, how people are like, I don't care about the past. I don't want to blame the past or make excuses. People come into therapy not wanting to blame the past all the time. Okay. And what I say about that is you might be done with the past, but the past ain't done with you. And so ignore it at your own risk. And really what it means is, we are wired in connection with our caregivers in our early lives. It sets a foundation of wiring that influences how we behave for the rest of our lives. It's not carved in stone. It's soft wired. That's the good news. We're influenced. Now, how many things do you guys remember before the age of 5? Here's what I remember. Maybe one, but I would suggest, much lower than 50% for most people. For most people, very little. So what does that mean? It means we're walking around influenced by experiences we can't remember. Most of us. Like, whoa, just if you can understand that, the implications of that are phenomenally huge. And if we just start with that, and this is now where we're getting into curiosity. Again, we don't want to blame the past. Well, the past influences us, and it influences us from our blind spots, from the ways we were treated, from the look on our mother's face when we were an infant and needed something. And not just once, but a repeated pattern of that over time can create an impact. And this is about blaming parents. You know, everyone does the best they can, all parents with the resources they have available to them. So this isn't about that, but it's acknowledging, because of our social nature, you know, if babies, we got giant brains, and if we were born fully wired and developed and brain development happened in the womb, too many women would die in childbirth and the species wouldn't have survived. So we're born blobs. And a lot of the brain development for the human being then happens after birth. You know, think about Bambi, a horse is running within a few minutes of being born. We're not running for 2 years. And that's because our brains are born undercooked and then they develop out of the womb. And what that means is the relationships and what we experience in our early relationships has an impact on us for the rest of our lives, because the brain is a prediction engine. And it says the way I've been treated is the way I'm always going to be treated. Don't assume anything else. And especially if you've been hurt, God damn it, don't assume anything else. If you've been hurt as a child and you don't remember it, and then it sets a pattern and you assume this is how the world is, this is how I am, this is how other people are. No, it's not. It's how you were treated.
You can find Curious AF on tradespodcast.com. Next up, we talk about the missing element of human-to-human interaction in mental health care in the trades with Shayne, Trevor, and Karen from Shayne's Story, the Aftershow.
I'm on sites all the time. I don't believe that safety can be done from an office.
No, I agree.
My belief is safety is behavioral, and that ties into what we're talking about here. I think the best way that we can reach people is through behavioral interactions. I believe in information. I believe in education, but I believe that how we're doing this and going and seeing people is the only way we're going to make a difference.
Yeah.
I just felt that so strongly
Yeah.
in my solar plexus.
It's just true because there's nothing that the three of us could sit here and write the best fucking book ever and sell it and make millions, but nobody's actually going to fucking read it. It's eye contact, it's breathing, it's energy. I'm not huge into a lot of stuff that people are pushing, as I said earlier. I'm in the belief that if people understand what we're dealing with, that we can be successful. I'm going to be honest, I don't push sobriety on people. I don't, that's their choice. Because I am a hard ass that way. I'm like, look, you have a choice. Do it. You're an adult.
Yeah.
I don't believe that the hand holding is the right direction with some people.
Yeah. Nobody could have told me what to do. Nobody was going to tell me what to do, man.
No, it's impossible.
I had it all figured out.
Yeah, when you're caught in it too, you're medicating so much.
Find Shayne's Story, the Aftershow, on tradespodcast.com. Next, advocate Kat Bahama talks with Daniel about losing her ironworker son Joseph to drug poisoning in Ditch the Tough, Keep the Love.
Regarding my son Joseph, he was killed by fentanyl poisoning in 2016. August of that year, in April, the health emergency had been called, and he was in trades. He was a journeyman ironworker and very, very proud of his work. Well liked by his colleagues, and he'd really found his niche, if you will. He was always a bright person. School was difficult because he had ADHD, so there was lots of advocacy done there for him throughout his school years. But he kind of really found himself at BCIT when he took the program there. It is kind of, as you know, ironwork is a little bit of a high-flying kind of, he'd been up on, actually, he was still a student when they were doing some work on Port Mann. So they were up there taking photos, but I have plenty of pictures of him up on goodness knows what, that you wouldn't catch me up there. He is definitely a person who I believe his issues with substances was really about his early childhood trauma and being traumatized by his dad. And that really, the legacy of that was his substance use as a teenager. And then he got through that. And then again, as an adult, when he was in stressful situations in his line of work as a young person, really put in charge of people decades older than he was. As a supervisor, and being offered oxy as something to help. And for he did say to me at one point that for him it was initially something that just really, calmed his brain down, and he was able to think more clearly, and so it did help him until it doesn't help anymore if it becomes right, a habitual thing. So he was, to me, self-medicating in a lot of ways. However, he had he'd gone through having these period of a few years of this being really problematic substance use, and then gone on methadone, and then weaned himself off methadone. And he'd been working away actually in Alberta. So he has 2 little boys. So he just hated being away from his kids. And so he came back to BC, and literally 6 weeks later, he died because he took a substance, he wasn't looking for opioids. He thought it was MDMA, and he actually got it on his job site. And I don't know whether he was buying it, giving it, whatever. I don't know, but it was predominantly fentanyl. So he was in that really vulnerable stage when people have stopped using opioids. They don't have that tolerance or anymore at all. And that it also really showcases, unfortunate word, how everyone who uses these days is at risk, right? Because it doesn't matter what you think you're taking. It can be, and it certainly is in things like MDMA and cocaine.
Things you would absolutely not expect it should be present in, right?
Exactly, but it is that cross contamination. But I don't think there was MDMA in whatever he took, unfortunately, and that was that.
Yeah, mislabeled fake pills and whatnot. Now, this was really early in the declaration of the overdose crisis. So I'm just wondering, how aware do you think he was, or even yourself, of the risks at that time? And then what really led up to that moment? He was working, you said, so is still active in the trades, right, leading up to that
day? No, like I said, he'd been working away in Alberta, and he just really wanted to be here in BC with his little guys. And he pretty much came back here, found a job almost immediately, and was out on the job at the same time looking for accommodation so that he would have space to have the boys with him. And he came home, I think it was June 29th or 30th, and then he died on August 15th.
And he was how old at that time?
25.
Wow.
And his little guys were 3 and 2. So Jackson, I guess, was closer to 4, because he was really close with his dad. So his father is a topic of, we talk about his dad all the time. He certainly, that's had an impact on him. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that really gets missed. It is about individuals. I mean, I've lost my son, but 2 little boys have lost their dad. And when we talk about trauma, we know that when children lose a parent, that's a trauma in their lives. And so that concerns me in terms of how this may play out. But I think it's something that we are not paying attention to, that this is intergenerational, and that it's going to have major consequences for the whole country beyond the grief and the loss of your family member. And not just for people who've lost family members, but those that are first responders and have been dealing with responding to these poisoning deaths, because they're not overdoses.
To catch more on this insightful episode on advocacy, find Ditch the Tough, Keep the Love. Closing out our Season 2 sampler, we get inspired by Kale, Trevor, and Karen from Random Recovery Talk.
Man, if you can start tomorrow with a positive mindset, clear mind, fresh breath of air, and maybe a new perspective on things, you're going to be good. It's not going to be great right away, but I promise you that it's going to be a little bit better and a little bit better. It never, I wish I could say that it just gets 100% and that you never have to face a struggle ever again. And you're never going to have issues pop up. It's like, no, you're still going to have battles, but the difference is you're going to be strong as fuck and you're going to be able to handle whatever the hell comes in front of you, because you start feeding yourself and you feed yourself more and more every day. You give yourself an opportunity to have a mindset that is unbreakable. And if you stay in that mindset and you keep focusing on it, and you have people that are around you that are like-minded, it just becomes the norm. And before I knew it, I'd have these coworkers come up like, "Hey, Kale, got a question for you." Like, "Yeah, what's up, man? When did you know that you needed to make a change or something wasn't right?"
What I find really interesting about what I was hearing in your story, Kale, is that like the recovery isn't the end of the road. It's the beginning of building a skill set that actually serves you in life. And then you've taken your skill set and you're using it to help lead other people, or not even that like, oh, I'm the leader. It's not like that. It's just like you're finding your way and you're saying, hey guys, it's not that bad over here. It's actually kind of cool. Do you want to come check it out? And in fact, they do want to come check it out because there weren't any other options before, right? And I, always think about like, we can't give other people what we don't have to give. So we have to go on that journey of figuring out like what the fuck is going on with my life and how do I get to where I want to be? How do I become the kind of person I want to be? Versus, a lot of people like will try out the drug route or will try out, other routes that are other types of addictions, and they get stuck, right? Mm-hmm. But it's, when we go into, I think recovery is really about getting unstuck. Yeah. And then getting some flow, some movement, and actually growing to where you want to grow to.
Yeah, that's right.
My particular brand of mental health, was such that the drugs really were a medicine for many years. And then it was the drugs that took me down to a point of desperation where I was ready to really find some answers. And as Kale probably understands, the answer was really easy. All I had to change was everything. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know that I would have got to that point. I spent, I'm 48 years old now. I was 43 years old when I went into rehab. And, I was broken down to a point where I could actually just open my mind and shut up and listen. And then fucking not stick so hard to these stupid ideas and concepts and things that I'd held so close to my heart for so many years. Like if they were so great and are fucking working, then why the hell was I in a rehab center, right?
Yeah, no, it's like I said, it hasn't been easy. It definitely, I wish I could say it's easier and everything's fixed, but like I said, you just get stronger. You get a lot stronger. You start putting yourself in a position to accept more. And like it's funny to say that because right before I came on this podcast tonight, I was actually doing some traveling around the city here with the brother-in-law, and we went to there's a sled show here in Saskatoon, and I was just walking around looking at different vendors, and out of nowhere, talking about a vending whatever booth that was up, and this guy mentioned something about addiction, and I told him, I was like, yeah, no, that's crazy. I was like, I got to go and do a podcast here. I got to be part of a podcast. He looked at me, he's like, oh, actually, and he's like, well, what's it about? I was like, well, it's about relating to guys, about ending the stigma in addiction and mental health, really being strong in the industry about what needs to fucking change. And he's like, actually, he's like, dude, he's like, I'm like 5 months sober. I like looked at him, I was like, are you kidding me? And I was like, you're serious right now? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm pumped. And I shook his hand right there. I'm like, dude, this is exactly what I needed. Like, I'm about to go into a podcast. I was nervous. I was super nervous. Like, what am I going to do when I get the opportunity to speak here? I was like, how can I make this the best that it can be? It's like, honestly, the truth. Just go out there and tell him what it is. If you see a guy that's hurting, man, don't be afraid to give him a hug. It's all right. It's okay to not be okay. And I proved that there was hundreds of people walking around. Right there, I celebrated this guy because, like, man, that is a huge step. If you can say that, you've got a 24 hours sober couple of hours sober, and that's the longest you've been sober in the last how many years? Dude, that is a fucking huge accomplishment.
A miracle.
And he's sitting there telling me in a vending booth, he's sitting there running a vending booth with him and his wife, partnered up together, not split up, and they're running this booth. I was like, this is incredible, man. This is exactly why I need to keep going, because it's not just up to me to go and change the world. I'm never going to change the world. That's not my job. But I also need some hope every once in a while too.
Let us know what you think about Random Recovery Talk and other episodes on tradespodcast.com and click on the survey for a chance to win a $200 grocery card. Off the Clock Toolbox Talk has been a Fraser House Society project, executive produced and co-hosted by Karen Janzen, managed by Delan Young on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Production of this material has been made in part through a financial contribution from Health Canada. The views expressed herein do not necessarily reflect the views of Health Canada or Fraser House Society. The content of this podcast is conversation between people with living experience and should not be taken as professional advice. Special thanks to the BC Sand, Stone and Gravel Association, keeping British Columbia going and growing, and for standing behind our tradespeople in the drug poisoning crisis. Help save lives! Go to tradespodcast.com to find tools and tips to promote the podcast on your site with minimal stressors. Like us on socials, Instagram at offtheclock.toolboxtalk. Send us constructive feedback in any form you'd like, tradespodcast@gmail.com. Help us, help you.